Well, this is just fantastic. Here I am, VAX 12 of the Galactic Council Intelligence Division, watching the biggest diplomatic disaster in 3,000 years unfold before my 4 eyes. And trust me, when you've lived through the Great Zephyrian Rebellion and the collapse of the Meridian Empire, you know disaster when you see it. The humans are leaving. Not just leaving the peace talks, mind you, but packing up their entire delegation and walking away from 2 centuries of carefully constructed interstellar diplomacy. And the worst part, they're doing it with those infuriating human smiles plastered across their faces. Ambassador Morgan, I call out, my voice carrying just enough desperation to make my translator crackle. Surely we can discuss this further? Rebecca Morgan, the human chief negotiator, turns to face me with that particular expression humans wear when they've made up their minds about something. You know the one. That mixture of polite courtesy and absolute steel that makes your scales itch with unease. I'm afraid not. VAX 12, she says, her tone so pleasant it could melt Plutonian ice. The human delegation has withdrawn from these proceedings, effective immediately. The silence in the Grand Assembly chamber is deafening. 37 different species, each representing billions of sentient beings, all staring at the small group of humans who've just told the most powerful governing body in the galaxy to, essentially, take a long walk off a short airlock. Chancellor Thys 7 of the hegemony rises from his ceremonial throne, his 6 arms trembling with what I can only assume is rage. This is preposterous. The negotiations were proceeding according to established protocols. And there it is, the moment that'll probably end up in history textbooks under the heading How Not to Handle Humans. Because, you see, Thys 7 has just made the classic mistake that every species in the galaxy has made at some point. He's assumed that humans follow the same rules as everyone else. Morgan's smile grows wider. Oh, Chancellor, the negotiations were proceeding exactly as you planned. That's precisely the problem. I feel my secondary stomachs clench. I've been studying human behavior for the better part of 50 years, and I recognize that tone. It's the same one they use right before they do something that makes absolutely no sense to anyone else in the galaxy but works out perfectly for them. I don't understand, Thys 7 says, which is probably the most honest thing he's said in decades. Of course you don't, Morgan replies, adjusting her simple black jacket. You've been negotiating with us for 6 months about territorial disputes, trade agreements, and military cooperation. Standard diplomatic procedure, right? The murmur of agreement from the assembled delegates sounds like the buzzing of 1,000 different insects. Everyone nods or performs their species equivalent gesture of assent. The thing is, Morgan continues, you never actually asked us what we wanted. I blink all 4 eyes in rapid succession. But we followed the galactic diplomatic protocols. We addressed every concern raised by the human delegation. Every concern that fit into your predetermined categories. Ambassador James Fletcher, Morgan's deputy, interjects. He's a tall, lean human with the kind of weathered face that suggests he's seen more combat than most of our military commanders. You had your nice little boxes, territorial sovereignty, resource allocation, defense partnerships, very tidy, very organized. The Kellen representative, a gelatinous being whose name roughly translates to blob of wisdom that sees all, makes a sound like deflating balloon. Are you suggesting our diplomatic framework is inadequate? I'm suggesting, Morgan says, her voice taking on that particular human quality that makes rational beings want to check their life insurance policies, that your diplomatic framework assumes everyone thinks like you do. This is getting worse by the minute. I can see the confusion spreading across the assembly like a virus. The Zentorians are exchanging rapid clicks of bewilderment. The Vorthan delegation has formed a defensive circle, their natural response to incomprehensible situations. Even the usually unflappable cerebral collective seems to be experiencing some sort of processing error. Perhaps I venture, hoping against hope to salvage something from this catastrophe, you could explain what we've overlooked? Morgan turns to me, and for a moment, I see something in her expression that makes my dorsal fins twitch with anxiety. It's not anger. Exactly. It's more like disappointment from a species that's barely been spacefaring for 3 centuries. Vax 12, you've been studying us for half a century. Tell me, what's the first thing humans do when they encounter a new problem? I think about it for a moment. You analyze the available data and formulate a logical response. The sound that comes from the human delegation is something between a laugh and a sigh. Fletcher shakes his head. We ask what if we just ignored the problem and did something completely different instead. That's not logical, the cerebral collective representative states flatly. Exactly, Morgan says. You've been trying to solve the human problem using logic. The thing is, we stopped being logical about 2,000 years ago. We found something better. The chamber erupts in a cacophony of confused alien voices. The hegemony delegation is demanding explanations. The crystalline minds are calculating probability matrices. The void dwellers are doing whatever it is they do when they're agitated, which involves a lot of shifting shadows and ominous whispers. Through it all, the humans remain perfectly calm. They're not even talking among themselves. They're just standing there, waiting. What, Chancellor, this 7 demands, his voice rising to dangerous levels, could possibly be better than logic? Spite, Morgan says cheerfully. The word hangs in the air like a toxic cloud. I can feel my diplomatic training cramping up and dying somewhere in my secondary brain. Spite? I managed to croak out. Spite, Morgan confirms. See, the thing about humans is that we're really good at holding grudges, and we've been holding one against the Galactic Council for about 50 years now. Fletcher steps forward. Ever since the Proxima incident. Oh no. My tertiary heart starts pounding. The Proxima incident. The one event that everyone in the galaxy has tacitly agreed to never mention in polite company. The one that resulted in the complete quarantine of an entire star system and the introduction of the Human Limitations Protocols to the Galactic Charter. That was a misunderstanding, I say quickly. The Council's actions were taken in the interest of galactic security. Right, Morgan says, her smile now resembling something that belongs on a predator. You quarantined our entire colonial fleet for 3 months while you assessed the threat level of human expansion. Do you remember what your assessment concluded? The silence is so complete I can hear the environmental system cycling air through the chamber. The report stated that humans were potentially dangerous but ultimately manageable, I whisper. Potentially dangerous but ultimately manageable, Morgan repeats. Not intelligent enough to pose a real threat, but just unpredictable enough to require supervision. The way she says that last word makes my scales want to crawl off my body and hide under a rock. The Council's oversight has been beneficial to human development. This 7 says, but his voice lacks its usual authority. Has it? Fletcher asks. Tell me, Chancellor, what's the current human population? Approximately 12 billion, spread across 43 worlds. This 7 responds automatically. And our military strength? Modest. 37 active ships, primarily focused on system defense and patrol duties. Our technological advancement level, adequate for your species' needs. You've achieved basic faster-than-light travel, elementary shield technology, and rudimentary artificial intelligence. Our economic output, sufficient for your internal requirements with minimal surplus for interstellar trade. Morgan nods approvingly. That's a very thorough assessment, Chancellor. I'm impressed by the accuracy of your intelligence gathering. I feel a cold dread settling in my stomach. When humans compliment you on your intelligence gathering, it usually means they're about to demonstrate just how wrong your intelligence is. There's just one tiny problem with those numbers, Morgan continues. They're not exactly complete. What do you mean? I ask, though I'm beginning to suspect I don't want to know. Fletcher reaches into his jacket and produces a small device that looks like nothing more than a simple communicator. This is a standard human diplomatic emergency beacon. Every member of our delegation carries one. Would you like to know what happens when I activate it? The chamber is so quiet you could hear a pin drop, or in this case, a civilization fall. I think we'd prefer not to, I say weakly. Too late, Fletcher says, pressing a button on the device. Nothing happens for exactly 30 seconds. Then the chamber's main display screen flickers to life, showing what appears to be a star map of the local galactic sector. It looks perfectly normal, except for the fact that there are approximately 3,000 more ships scattered across it than there should be. What are we looking at? The Cerebral Collective asks. The actual human fleet, Morgan says casually. The one that's been hiding in plain sight for the past 20 years. The number of ships on the display continues to grow. 4,000. 6,000. 8,000. The dots are multiplying so fast the display can barely keep up. This is impossible. This is 7 breaths. Our monitoring stations would have detected such a massive buildup, would they? Morgan asks. Tell me, how many human cargo vessels pass through Council space on any given day? Hundreds. I say automatically. You're one of the primary suppliers of agricultural products and raw materials to the rim worlds. And do you inspect every cargo hold of every ship? The implications hit me like a meteor strike. You've been smuggling military assets inside commercial vessels. Smuggling is such an ugly word. Fletcher says, we prefer creative resource allocation. The display screen updates again, showing what appears to be the technical specifications of a human cargo vessel. The cross-section reveals that what everyone assumed was a simple transport ship is actually a sophisticated military platform disguised as a flying warehouse. Every major trade route in the galaxy has been monitored by human intelligence assets for the past 2 decades, Morgan explains. Every strategic resource depot, every military installation, every communication relay. We know where all your ships are, what they're carrying, and where they're going. The sound that comes from the hegemony delegation is something between a roar and a whimper. You've been spying on us. We've been learning from you, Morgan corrects. There's a difference. What difference? The Kellen representative demands. Spies steal secrets. Students steal everything else. The chamber erupts in chaos. Delegates are shouting in 17 different languages. The Cerebral Collective is making alarming computational noises. The Void Dwellers have started manifesting shadow tentacles, which is never a good sign. Through it all, the humans remain perfectly calm. They're not even looking at the pandemonium they've created. They're just watching the exits. Order. The 7 bellows. I demand order. The noise gradually subsides, but the tension in the air could be cut with a plasma blade. You're threatening us, the Chancellor says. This is an act of war. Actually, Morgan says, this is an act of leaving. And that's when I realize what's been bothering me about the humans' behavior. They're not angry. They're not making demands. They're not even gloating about their revelation. They're just done. You're serious, I say. You're actually withdrawing from the Galactic Council. We are, Morgan confirms. Effective immediately, the human species formally withdraws from all Council treaties, agreements, and protocols. We'll be conducting our own foreign policy from now on. The implications are staggering. Humans represent barely 1% of the galaxy's population, but they control some of the most fertile agricultural worlds and strategic resource deposits. Their withdrawal would destabilize trade routes, disrupt supply chains, and create power vacuums that could lead to conflicts across dozens of systems. You can't do this, this 7 says desperately. The economic disruption alone would affect billions of beings. Should have thought of that before you classified us as potentially dangerous but ultimately manageable, Fletcher replies. But where will you go? I ask. What will you do? Morgan's smile returns, and this time it's genuinely warm. We're going to do what humans do best. Vax 12. We're going to find our own way. The human delegation begins moving toward the exits, not hurrying, not fleeing, just walking away with the casual confidence of people who've already won a game everyone else is still trying to understand. Wait. I call out. This is madness. You can't survive outside the Council's protection. Morgan pauses at the chamber's main exit. Protection from what? From the other species. From economic isolation. From military threats. You mean from all those problems you've been protecting us from by keeping us weak and dependent? The question hangs in the air like a challenge, and suddenly, I understand exactly what's happening here. You were never weak, were you? I whisper. No, Morgan says simply. We were just polite, and with that, the humans leave. Just like that, 2 centuries of carefully constructed diplomatic relationships, gone. The most stable governmental system in galactic history, suddenly missing one of its most important components. As the chamber doors close behind them, I can't help but think that we've just made the biggest mistake in the history of interstellar relations. The really terrifying part? I don't think the humans are finished with us yet. 3 weeks. That's all it took for the galaxy to start unraveling. I'm standing in what used to be the Grand Council chamber, watching Chancellor This-7 pace back and forth like a caged Nexarian wolf. His 6 arms are gesticulating wildly as he speaks into his personal communicator, and from the increasingly shrill tone of his voice, I can tell the conversation isn't going well. What do you mean the shipment was intercepted? He's saying. By whom? There are no hostile forces in that sector. Oh, but there are. Chancellor. There most definitely are. The past 21 days have been an education in just how thoroughly the humans had integrated themselves into galactic society. It started small, delayed agricultural shipments, communication disruptions, minor trade route adjustments. Nothing that screamed coordinated campaign to anyone who wasn't looking for it. But I was looking for it. After 50 years of studying human behavior, I'd learned to recognize their handiwork. Vax 12. A voice calls from behind me. I turn to see Ambassador Crex 9 from the Meridian Collective approaching, his usually pristine ceremonial robes looking decidedly rumpled. Have you heard from the Outer Rim territories? Which ones? I ask, though I suspect I already know the answer. Any of them. All of them. The entire Outer Rim has gone silent. I nod grimly. Communication blackout started 2 days ago. Affects approximately 43 star systems. 43 systems that just happen to be the primary suppliers of rare earth minerals to the core worlds, Crex 9 points out unnecessarily. And all of them have significant human populations. I-80. We stand in silence for a moment, watching This-7 continue his increasingly frantic phone calls. The irony isn't lost on me. The being who dismissed humans as ultimately manageable is now struggling to manage the consequences of that dismissal. Sir, my aide, Plex 4, approaches with a data pad clutched in his primary manipulator. The latest intelligence reports from the border sectors. I take the pad and scan the contents. Each line makes my dorsal fins twitch with growing anxiety. What is it? Crex 9 asks. Human merchant vessels have stopped accepting council currency. I read aloud. They're demanding payment in what they call hard assets, rare metals, energy crystals, and I pause, double-checking the translation. A. Promises of future non-interference. Promises of non-interference. Crex 9 repeats. What does that even mean? Before I can answer, the chamber's main communication array crackles to life. The massive holographic display shows the familiar blue and green emblem of the Galactic Council, but instead of the usual automated message, a very human face appears on the screen. It's Rebecca Morgan, looking exactly as composed as she did when she walked out of here 3 weeks ago. Behind her, I can see what appears to be a command center of some kind, sleek, efficient, and definitely not built using Council-approved technology. Greetings, members of the Galactic Council, she says, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's speakers. I hope you're all doing well. The casual pleasantness of her tone makes my scales crawl. This-7 drops his communicator and spins around to face the display. Morgan. What is the meaning of this communication? Just checking in, she replies with that same infuriating human smile. I wanted to make sure you were aware of some recent developments in human space. If you're referring to the communication disruptions and trade irregularities, This-7 says, we demand an immediate explanation. And, oh, those aren't irregularities, Morgan says cheerfully. Those are features. Features? I managed to croak out. Features of our new independence. You see, when we withdrew from the Council, we realized we had a bit of a problem. We'd been so integrated into galactic society that simply leaving wasn't really an option. and too many loose ends, too many ongoing commitments. Fletcher's voice comes from somewhere off screen. Tell them about the contracts. Ah yes, the contracts, Morgan says. Thank you, James. You see, over the past 2 centuries, human colonies have signed approximately 12,000 different trade agreements, defense pacts, and resource-sharing arrangements with various council members. I feel my secondary stomachs drop. You're not honoring the agreements? Oh, we're honoring them completely, Morgan assures me. Every single clause, every single subsection, every single legal technicality. The problem is, most of those agreements were negotiated under the assumption that humans would remain council members. So they contain some very interesting provisions about what happens if that status changes. The display shifts, showing what appears to be a legal document covered in dense text. I recognize the format. It's a standard council trade agreement, the kind that gets rubber stamped by bureaucrats who assume nothing important will ever change. Section 47, subsection 12. Morgan reads from the document. In the event that either party withdraws from Galactic Council membership, all existing agreements shall be subject to immediate renegotiation under the auspices of the departing party's preferred arbitration system. The silence in the chamber is deafening. Your preferred arbitration system? This 7 asks weakly. Human law, Morgan says simply. Specifically, the legal codes of the Terran Colonial Authority, which, I should mention, don't recognize the concept of mandatory trade obligations or compulsory resource sharing. That's impossible. Crex 9 sputters. Those agreements are binding under council law. Council law, Morgan agrees. But we're not council members anymore, remember? We're an independent nation now, with our own legal system and our own interpretation of contract law. I'm starting to understand the true scope of what the humans have done. They haven't just withdrawn from the council, they've used their withdrawal as a legal weapon to restructure every single relationship they have with the galactic community. What do you want? I ask, cutting through the increasingly hysterical babbling of my colleagues. Morgan's expression becomes serious for the first time since the communication began. We want what we've always wanted. Vax 12, we want to be treated as equals. You are equals. This 7 protests. All council members have equal standing. Do they? Fletcher's voice comes from off-screen again. Tell me, Chancellor, when was the last time a human was elected to the High Council? That's not relevant to. Never, Morgan says. In 200 years of membership, not a single human has held a position of real authority in the council hierarchy. We've been junior partners at best, supervised dependents at worst. The selection process is based on merit and experience. This says as 7 says defensively. Is it? Or is it based on the assumption that some species are more qualified to lead than others? The question hangs in the air like an accusation. I think about the composition of the High Council, 7 species, all of them among the oldest and most established in the galaxy. All of them convinced of their own superiority. All of them guilty of exactly what Morgan is suggesting. What are your terms? I ask quietly. Our terms are simple, Morgan replies. We want a seat at the adult table. Not the children's table where we've been sitting for the past 2 centuries, but the actual decision-making body of the council. The High Council has operated with 7 members for over 3,000 years. This 7 objects. The balance of power is carefully maintained. Then I guess you'll have to adjust, Morgan says, because those are our terms. Full membership in the High Council, with all the rights and privileges that entails, and if we refuse, Morgan's smile returns, and this time it's absolutely predatory. Then you'll continue to experience the current disruptions to your supply chains, communication networks, and trade routes, indefinitely. You're holding the galaxy hostage. Crex 9 accuses. We're exercising our rights as an independent nation. Morgan corrects. The same rights that every other species in the galaxy enjoys. The display shifts again, showing what appears to be a tactical map of the local galactic sector. The human ships we saw 3 weeks ago are still there, but now they're accompanied by something else. Dozens of other vessels bearing the emblems of various minor species and independent colonies. You see, Morgan continues, We weren't the only ones who felt marginalized by the Council's policies. The Outer Rim territories, the independent mining colonies, the frontier settlements, they've all been looking for an alternative to Council membership for decades. You're forming an alliance, I realize. We're forming a confederation, Morgan corrects. The Free Worlds Coalition. 27 systems and counting, all committed to the principle of genuine self-determination. The implications are staggering. The humans haven't just withdrawn from the Council, they've created a competing power structure that threatens the very foundation of galactic governance. This is treason. This Seven shouts, "This is democracy." Morgan replies calmly, "Something the Council might want to consider trying sometime. You cannot seriously expect us to capitulate to these demands." Crex 9 says, "We don't expect anything." Morgan says, "We're simply informing you of the new reality. The galaxy has changed, gentlemen. The question is whether you're going to adapt to that change or be swept away by it." The communication ends abruptly, leaving us staring at a blank screen. The silence that follows is broken only by the soft hum of the chamber's environmental systems. "Well," I say finally, "that could have gone better." This is Seven slumps into his ceremonial chair, looking every one of his 800 years. How did we miss this? How did we fail to see what they were planning? Because we assumed they thought like us, I reply. We assumed they wanted what we wanted: stability, order, predictable outcomes. We never considered that they might want something entirely different. What do they want? Crex 9 asks. I think about everything I've learned about human psychology over the past 50 years. Their stubborn independence, their refusal to accept limitations, their bizarre ability to turn disadvantages into advantages. They want to be free, I say. Not free from responsibility or consequences, but free to make their own choices and live with the results. That's chaos. This Seven mutters. That's humanity, I correct. And we just learned that chaos can be a very effective form of order. My aide approaches with another data pad. Sir, we're receiving reports from across the galaxy. The communication disruptions are spreading. Trade routes are being rerouted. Several more systems have declared independence and requested membership in the Free Worlds Coalition. I take the pad and scan the information. The list of affected systems is growing by the hour. Each one represents thousands of beings who have chosen uncertainty over Council supervision. They're not going to stop, I realize. This isn't just about human independence. They're trying to reshape the entire Galactic Order. Can they succeed? Crex 9 asks. I look at the tactical display, still showing the growing constellation of human and allied vessels. I think about the past 3 weeks, about how quickly and efficiently the humans had demonstrated their true capabilities. I remember Rebecca Morgan's confident smile and the casual way she'd announced the end of 2 centuries of galactic stability. They already have, I say. We just haven't admitted it yet. The chamber falls silent again. Around us, the greatest governmental system in galactic history is slowly coming apart at the seams, undone by a species we dismissed as potentially dangerous but ultimately manageable. It turns out we were half right. They were potentially dangerous. We just got the ultimately manageable part spectacularly wrong. As I watch my colleagues grapple with the new reality, I can't help but admire the humans' approach. They hadn't conquered the galaxy through military might or economic dominance. They'd simply convinced everyone else that there was a better way to organize society and then demonstrated that they were right. It was, I had to admit, a masterpiece of political maneuvering. And the most terrifying part? I suspected they were just getting started. The galaxy would never be the same. And honestly, maybe that wasn't such a bad thing after all.